In this video, let's talk specifically about the vocabulary that has to do with planes. And planes, remember, are like you can think of it as being like a flat surface, an X and a Y coordinate system, something that has, length and width, basically, flat. So we have a nice picture here of a plane, and we have points that are all around it. So we're going to see some vocabulary here. First vocabulary word is coplanar. Coplanar points are points on the same plane. This is kind of like collinear was points on the same line. Linear for line. Coplanar points are points on the same plane. So over here we would have point D, E, and G would be coplanar points because they're on the same plane. Non-coplanar points cannot be placed in a single plane. So for instance, D, E, and F would not be coplanar because F is in a different plane. Coplanar lines are lines on the same plane. So if we had, like, for instance, this line here that goes from D to E, or this line here that goes from G to E, those would be coplanar lines because they're lines on the same plane. They would also be called intersecting lines because they intersect in exactly one point. Right here at E is where they would intersect at. So that tells us those are intersecting lines. Now let me jump down here to concurrent lines also. Concurrent lines are lines that intersect in a single point. So we can also call those concurrent lines. Or we could call DF and GF concurrent lines because they intersect in a single point as well. Now skew lines, I skipped that for a minute, but let's go back to that. Skew lines are lines that cannot be contained in a single plane. They are non-coplanar. So for instance, our line here of DF, that line, and our line here of GE, those are skew lines because they are not in the same plane. Now, we do know what parallel is from our previous math lessons. Parallel lines are lines that are going to run side by side and never ever touch, and they won't have any points in common. Well, we can also have parallel planes. So they're just planes that run side by side each other and never touch also. They have no points in common. Let's see what else we have here. Here's an example of parallel planes. These two planes that are like flat, so you can think of it as almost like the ceiling and the floor. Those are planes, but they're never ever going to touch. Okay. Two distinct planes that intersect have a single line in common. So for instance, here we have this plane and this plane that are intersecting. They intersect in this single line here of AB. Let's see what else we have here as far as vocabulary. A line and a plane are parallel if their intersection is the empty set, meaning that they do not intersect, or if the line is in the plane. So for instance, this line L is parallel to this plane because they're running side by side and never ever going to touch. But technically also this line M is also parallel to the plane because it lies within the plane itself. And then if we were just looking at the lines, M and L would be parallel to each other also. Now there is such a thing as a half plane, and a half plane is exactly what you think it should be. If you have a line, say for instance this line that is, and I'm going to extend it out a little bit. it divides the plane into two parts, one side and then the other side. So this side would be half of a plane, the other side would be the other half of a plane. So technically that would be a half plane.